And we're back. We have a caller who's called in and has a question regarding the closure, I believe, of the shelter.
Yes, I wanted to address a couple of things. Number one is the terminology. We do not have a shelter anymore, period. It was closed down. What we do have is a holding facility where animal control picks up animals, holds them for 3 days, and then they release them to other agencies that put them out for adoption. So the funds that the county is coming up with now are for the food and the care for the animals that are there now. And we're still holding, by order of the court, over 80 animals from the trials pending from the woman that had all those animals confiscated in Tonopah. So they're being held indefinitely at the expense of animal control. That's why those doors are not literally shut. They are mandated by NRS law to pick up any animals and to protect the citizens of this county from those kinds of situations. So that clarifies that. I've been active with this for over a year. Another thing is the county codes. They are literally getting rid of the commissioners, not just they, the commissioners are getting rid of a lot of the county code 6 definitions and regulations that included the sheriff's responsibilities for licensing and for rabies vaccines and so forth. She's being removed, or that department is being removed completely out of the codes. That's being taken out, even Title 17. Anything that's got a direct correlation to the sheriff's department and the shelter are being removed completely. And a lot of them are being taken out and just leaving the basics that animal control would be responsible for. And the county says because they do not have the funds to keep one going. Now, I have a good friend who is really against doing anything that might entail raising taxes or having anything to do with government. We kind of split on this idea because I did some investigation and spoke with the town finance manager and the town manager, who happens to be also the county manager, and they do have funds to support a shelter, but the contract is complicated. If we had a legitimate, and we do have several, a legitimate animal shelter or foundation that would be willing to take a contract with the county animal control, they would be subsidized for the animals that animal control picked up for their care, for the 3 days that they have them, for their care, and then after that 3 days, they would take custody of the animal. And that contract is the kind of contract that was just in place with Tails End, and the county is willing to pay $250,000 a year to subsidize anyone that would make a bid on those contracts.
Well, that's interesting to know that still exists, because there are some spay and neuter, national spay and neuter groups. The Sam Simon Foundation is one that, out of California. Those kinds of entities who have their own funding would be the kind of entities to come in. But the question is whether or not Nye County would be able to do what they say they're going to do for a year, for 5 years, or whatever. In other words,
that would be the town.
Say it again, please.
That would be the town, not the county. The county has nothing in their budget left for a shelter. The town, however, is separate from the shelter, from the county.
That's the point.
Town funds, and the town cannot use county funds, so they have to be separate.
That's an excellent point, and the town could establish a shelter using town funds, as you were saying. That's a classic idea, and it's just again about $250,000 a year would maintain the shelter and at least allow for spaying and neutering and to be able to move animals in and out. I mean, the fact that there's 70 or 80 animals in legal custody without there being some place for them to be outside of that, just little lockup, that is kind of that's criminal. That's kind of like when you have a place to park the cars that you catch with people driving drunk. You got a lot to lock those up, but they don't have a place to lock up the unwanteds. That's kind of a...
Yeah, and that's another thing. I get into all these details. I did ask the DA at one of the Board of County Commissioners meetings why they just don't release those animals. She said because they're personal property, and the person that owns those animals happens to be a legal, knowledgeable person that knows how to continue these trials indefinitely. So the next thing I pondered was, heck, it might be worth getting sued to release those animals because it would be less expensive in the long run.
Well, you're not going to get an argument from me on that one. I personally think that it would take it would take someone with some fortitude to stand up and just say, look, these animals cannot be kept in these conditions any longer. We have the authority under the state and county ordinances, the authority to, it says that the sheriff may dispose, and that means, adopt them out, which I would hope is what they would do, and not put them down, but adopt them out and get them out of the miserable conditions that they're in and not continue it on, because the people that own those dogs are only responsible for the first 2 weeks of their care. And if they've been in the care for 4 or 5 or 7 months and it's 60, 70 dogs, you're talking about thousands of dollars a month that the taxpayers are paying for animals, and it's senseless when in reality someone just needs to step up and do the right thing and worry about getting sued later. Do the right thing for the animals.
I have a question for the caller, actually. Are you still there?
Yes.
Tails End Animal Shelter contract came to an end, I believe, right around March, and they had a $225,000 annual contract, but due to their what the PV Times called the grim budget situation, they had to close down. Are you saying that there is money or there are funds available to reopen that shelter under new management?
Well, not Tails End by any means am I suggesting that. But
no, I'm not saying Tails End. I mean that could say if I wanted it, I'm not going to, but I say, if JQ Public wanted to step in and had the facility or had the ability to take over, are monies there for that to happen?
Right. That was a county contract.
Right.
And so what I'm suggesting is the town have a contract with a person that's already in business. I think Tails End gave up their business. That's why I say I'm not advocating for one or the other,
right.
But a legitimate, I keep stressing, legitimate shelter is already available, and the town, we would have to vote on that because the technicality is simple. The county animal control officers pick up animals in Gabbs and Beatty, Manhattan, Tonopah, everywhere in the county, and they bring them to, when we had a county shelter, to the county shelter. Now they will bring them to a county holding facility. But if they brought them to a town shelter, then they would have to have a contract to do that. Each town would have to have a contract for the animal control to bring animals to their town. If they picked up an animal in Tonopah, Tonopah would have to have a contract or have to have a shelter where they could be surrendered to that town. Every town would be individual.
I believe Tonopah does have a very small shelter, but I don't know if it's 8 or 10 dogs, but I know that Tonopah does have a small shelter. But there's definitely desperate straits for these animals that are in the shelter. The idea of just totally gutting Title VI, I think, is wrong-headed. Basically, there should be some attention paid to trying to find someone, as you said, a bona fide, real person with real experience to come in and run the shelter operation and do it with a contract with the town and improve the shelter, by the way, and try to make it a little bit larger. They built a $300 million jail right behind the place, but they didn't spend $20 on the dogs.
I'm also kind of looking toward the future. That they say now that won't entail any raising taxes for Pahrump, but you never know. If they're capable of making these laws as we go to suit their budget, then we could be in real serious trouble. But it was just one kind of a solution to help the animals. We're doing a terrific job now. The animal control officers actually are using Facebook and some other social media to help reunite the animals they pick up. And I'm looking forward to the day they start enforcing the rules about people that let their animals run around and not be vaccinated and so forth. But right now, they're doing a great job on reuniting almost all the animals they pick up.
I agree with that. I know they're going the extra mile, and that's the duty of animal control. It's not about pick up all the dogs and throw them in the pound. It's to try to reunite lost animals, or animals that may have lost their way, or to help someone who might not know that they need to have a license or that they need to feed so much to, that's the duty of animal control, is to be of a help and not to be like the animal police. And so I agree that they're doing a good job trying to do what they can with the limited resources that they have.
Okay. Well, I thank you for your time and your input, and I'll listen up for some other callers.
Thank you.
Thank you for calling, ma'am. Wow, that was a good one.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, when we were discussing the issue of the budget, and I was unaware that the town had any money left in it, and I guess so. Obviously, they would have had revenues that had been developed over a period of time, and they had some left over when the town was disbanded.
Disbanded, right.
But if there's money there, I mean, it probably should be allocated to things that the people want, not just what certain politicians think we want.
I would agree with that. And in the case of the pound, this shelter, if we go roll the ball way back, I believe that the town of Pahrump actually built that shelter, and then gave it to the county or whatever it was for the county to maintain it and to keep it going. But I believe that originally in '86 or something like that, whenever it was built, that the town of Pahrump actually built that shelter, and it needs to go back to the people in the town.
Well, it's actually the town is part of the county, so it's all one big family.
It's a big mashed up
all right.
family.
We got another break coming up, and please watch your commercials and patronize our supporters.